Okay, looks like I'm live. Um, Let me just double check. Yeah, everything's working. Uh, yeah, today we're gonna go over something fun. Today we're going to go over um, so today I was at Panera. I really don't like Panera that much, but I was just starving. I need something instantly, and I wanted to read at the same time. And I put on this video, and I was like, I have to share this video because it's too interesting. It's a Robert Anton Wilson video, and I got halfway through. And I'm like, all right, I need to react to this on stream because it was just very interesting. But before I get into any of that stuff, um, before I start talking about any of that stuff, I just want to update you guys on the Red Book so far. So it's a book that certain sections I can fly through, certain sections I it's really out there. It's um it's something that I'm gonna have to read several times before I grasp everything about it. I don't know if I should admit to knowing this, but um, if you've read anything by like Crowley, anything by Manly P. Hall, anything more of that nature, more philosophical, it reminds you a lot of that. It reminds you a lot of paradoxical in nature and not quite um, giving you a definite answer of what it is it's talking about, but that interpretation, you reading between the lines, it's supposed to give you your own personal epiphany, your own personal enlightenment, and that's really the point of doing that. But it's just it doesn't tend to read something very easy, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's I don't know. I can't wait to do that video because I'm gonna even write some notes down. I'm gonna even write some things I want to talk about. That'll be a nice change of pace for me because I've never actually done that. I've never actually like planned what I'm writing or anything like that. So, but yeah, without further ado, we'll get into this is a short video. This is of course him being very ahead of his time. I just ordered his most popular trilogy. It's like 900 pages, but hopefully I'll knock out one of the first books in a few weeks. But I still have to read these things. I swear it's taking me forever to read the Red Book because it's so out there. It's gonna take me forever to read this one. Um, I'll be able to read this one in a day. Um, Same thing with this, and then Faust will probably take me maybe a week. I don't know. I don't know how long these things are gonna take me. It's always the books that I'm like I'm gonna fly through that take me the longest, and it's always the books that I'm like, oh, I don't want to read this. It's gonna suck. Like I read a 600 page book on investing in like less than a week, and I was like, all right, I thought that was gonna take me a much longer time. So it's weird. It's weird how it works sometimes, but yeah.
Other fields of activity, like the computer industry, where you could think that the conspiracy thing happens. We're all coerced in getting into Windows, which means Bill Gates Windows to the world. How do you see that?
Well, in the research we're doing on the Encyclopedia of Conspiracy Theories, I find there's a hell of a lot of people who either believe that Bill Gates is the Antichrist or they hate him.
This is 1997. He's saying this. It's so funny how accurate some of the things he says are. Um, Again, he was talking about space being right around the corner, and unfortunately, that's not true. But it's so funny that he's bringing this up now.
So much that they're saying that, whether they believe it or not. I think it's kind of funny to imagine the Antichrist as the head of a computer company, but, well, why not? Uh, that's one of the things we're going to have to cover in the encyclopedia. There's a lot of conspiracy.
I don't really think he's uh, like. There's a lot of people that are like, "Oh my God, he's like actively doing all these." I think he's just a guy that doesn't really have a moral compass. Guy that is like willing to crack a few eggs to make an omelet, and it's quite unfortunate because I think I was saying this yesterday. Like the people that are at the top, the people that have the most power in the world, are not the people that deserve it. Um, the people that deserve it are the people that forego the worldly desires, forego the insane bank account that you could never hope to deplete. Like the people that really should be in charge of these companies aren't the people that are in charge of them. It's always the greedy person. It's always the person that is willing to put profits before everything. I mean, even look into Bezos. Bezos, like the people that work for him, he's very against them unionizing, whether you think unions is a good thing, whether you don't. There's a lot of poor conditions with Amazon. And the sad thing is it's like a reality. Like you can't really do anything about Amazon because it's the best product. That's the problem with it. Like until something comes around that's another option that is just as good as it, like people are going to keep using this. And this is like the big issue with things. This is the big issue with any sort of political activism. It's like you can tell me how bad something is, but unless you give me another alternative that's just as good, nothing will change. That's the sad reality of things. But
Conspiracy theories about computers. There's the crypto space, which is the part of cyberspace that nobody can find because it's been crypto space with their own money, which means that the government never gets any record of it, and God knows how many people are evading taxes that way.
it's not really true. So, not financial advice, I have to say this. So when you trade Bitcoin, when you trade a wallet, um, once you have that wallet identification, you can see every other transaction that that person has. Now, getting that wallet is a whole other story, but there's basically a public ledger, and you don't know who necessarily owns each one, but when you can identify who owns each one, then you can kind of see everything that they've spent money on. There's a few cryptocurrencies that do a good job of getting rid of this. There's a program, I think it's called Tornado. I don't know too much about it, but the essence of it is like, let's say you have one Ethereum and you want to get another Ethereum that doesn't have the history behind it, it will like spin it around in the tornado and give you one that has a different history so that in essence you get privacy. But it's like anything. When you have things like this for the use of privacy, the wrong people are going to start using it. The wrong people are going to get into this, and illicit things are going to be sold with this type of currency. And in essence, it's like, I mean, people talk about government regulation, but the reason we have government regulation is because like we deserve it. That's truly the sad reality of thing. It's like whatever laws are on the books is because people were abusing it and people were abusing it at the expense of other people. I mean, that's the vast majority of laws, and it's like a George Carlin bit. It's like if you don't like the state of our government, just understand that's the government that represents us. That's the government that we voted for. That's the government that we deserve. Because I mean, you can't make a societal impact until you make an impact on yourself. And it's like everyone is just pointing the fingers at everyone else, and it's like at a certain point you got to look in the mirror.
And how many
By,
countries?
for instance, exchanging services without telling the tax people.
Well, they're using their own kind of crypto money in crypto space, you know. And then there's this crazy business about the attempts to censor the net, which we actually passed a bill in this country in last year in Congress. And the only way they can enforce that is if they start invading European countries and seizing people who are putting stuff online that they disapprove of.
I think there's something like certain countries in the EU will try to sanction you if you say certain things online. It's actually a really the world that we live in when different parts of the world will come after you for the things you say, for the things you believe. You would think that freedom of speech would become something that became more and more self-evident as a virtue of not just a country, but of humanity. But it all goes back to control because when you have freedom to think, you have freedom to act. And when you have freedom to act, it usually means you're not going to um, be subservient to the powers that be. It's just a natural nature of humanity that the second a new government is installed after a revolution is the second that the rebellion begins to fester. This is an idea that Camus puts so perfectly. He has this very famous quote. It's "I rebel, therefore we exist," and it's the fundamental human experience, the fundamental human desire, need to push back towards conformity, push back towards society in some way. Be resistant for the sake of being an individual. It's a very weird thing when you break it down, but Um, this is why you see most political movements never really accomplish anything. There's very few revolutions that ever installed a government that was more fair, that was more just than the one previously. Maybe the American Revolution was the only one because it was the one we got away from a king. But aside from that, a lot of them, even though they started off fairly democratic, if you look at one of the French revolutions when Robespierre took power, he was all for the liberation of the working class, the liberation of the people, but that eventually devolved into sending every person that was an enemy of the state to the guillotine. So I don't know, these are very interesting concepts, and I don't really think there's a good answer, and that's the problem with it. Like, if there's not a good answer, then then like the vast majority of people like will just go one way or the other, and it's that we don't really allow room for nuance, especially in the Western world, which really sucks because life is all nuance. Life is a paradox. Like, what gives your life meaning is the idea of death. But to so many people, they just avoid this principle. They think that death is the end of things, but death is really the beginning because when you accept your mortality, that's when you have the sense of urgency. That's when you understand that every second that you have is fleeting and every second must be spent in pure purpose and pure meaning and pure fulfillment. But
Now, they did that to Panama,
Hmm.
but I don't think our government is crazy enough to invade France or Germany or Nederland or anywhere over there. They're not that crazy. So the law is just something that Congress did because they were too stupid to understand how the net operates. But it's going to be funny watching them try to enforce it.
But don't you think that government or the American government is actually trying to sneak into what is in computers in all over the world? I mean, there are technical ways to do that.
I wonder what this guy would say about the current state of the world. I'm sure it would be a very interesting perspective. I don't know. This is a guy that I've done not that much, maybe more research than anyone else, honestly. But he just has one of the most unique perspectives, and he's one of those um, it's one of those voices that like is just so much him. Like you can't classify this guy's beliefs, and that's my favorite part about them. Like when you can when you can pigeonhole someone to something, I think that means that they are an ideology, not an individual, and there's a clear difference. Like, I mean, ask Ted Cruz for his opinion. Ted Cruz can't give you an opinion; he can give you the Republican Party's opinion. It's the same thing. Ask Pelosi her opinion; she can give you what the Democratic policy is, but she can't give you any sort of semblance of a human response. Like, I bet you if you said something horrible like, "Oh my God, well, this happened to me," she'd be like, "Yeah, I feel bad for you. Make sure to get out and vote, and so this never happens again." Like she would turn everything into a political stance, everything into a political statement. It's like, where's the humanity, man? What you said about my writing, I think you missed the point of it. You're talking about it from a narrative perspective. It's not a narrative perspective. It's not supposed to be a narrative. It's if you read The Prophet, if you read the Book of Mere Dad, it's modeled after that. I don't want to write a story that's a work of fiction. I want to write myself. I want to write my own ideas, my own thoughts. I don't think most books that write in a traditional style are worth reading. So I don't want to write that stuff myself.
Well, a lot of, yeah, it's another thing that we're investigating for the encyclopedia. There's a lot of people who believe that you can't do anything on the computer without the government knowing about it. I just don't believe the government is that well staffed. I have plenty of evidence in my own lifetime that the government is overworked, understaffed, and generally confused. And I'm just not as paranoid about the government as most people. I don't think.
It's like, I mean, this is the way that you should be. Like, the more paranoid you become, the more you're going to just see things, the more you're going to be like I was on Instagram the other day. It was so fucking funny. It was like this chick was at the gym and some guy was just bench pressing and she's like, there's this FBI agent following me. It's like, why would an FBI agent be following you to the gym? You know what I mean? She's probably just someone that like basically shit posts on Facebook calling themselves a freedom fighter. Like I doubt she had any sort of relevance. I doubt she had any sort of social pull. Like if you were truly that like influential, I don't think you would. I think they would send someone better to tail you than someone that is just benching behind. You know what I mean? It's like it's just so moronic, like how people get so fixated on certain ideas and they become so solidified in their minds. I ate 5 watermelons because I thought they were homeless. Interesting. How did you?
The government is my friend. I don't think I don't love it and trust it like you're supposed to, but I don't think they're competent enough to really spy on all of us as effectively as most paranoid theories complain. They don't know what's going on most of the time.
Is this like I love the way this guy thinks. Let's like, we'll go to this video. This video is really interesting.
These are some exercises
That's too bad.
to make clear
How does that sound? He looks so old in this compared to the other one.
that I have been talking about the universe that's
He had
turned in by the
he had polio as a kid, so it's eventually what he died from. So it looks like it's starting to take its toll on him.
human nervous system. I am not talking about some imaginary objective universe which exists apart from us, but only about the universe we experience. These exercises should make that more clear. Okay, the first exercise, get a friend to help you and hold the newspaper. Walk slowly away from you until you can't read the headlines. Turn the page to make sure you can't read the headlines. Then have your friend read the top headline. And you will, if you're normal, you will immediately see it. Now,
Does it sped up too much? He's talking like really slow. You can see like his whatever he's dealing with caught up to him. But this is just so.
after doing these experiments is much more helpful than just hearing about them, by the way.
Think about like let's say you can't read English. Like right now, obviously I can read English, but or I can claim to. Like I never read any of the books I suggest to you guys. What if I just like looked at book summaries? That'd be so funny, wouldn't it? I just listen to summaries of them and just say the coolest parts. Um, but like right now, like I can see the words. The words like have meaning to me. But let's say it's a different language. Until I learn that language, it's nothing. Until I learn that language, it doesn't associate any sort of meaning, any sort of depth, any sort of image. My imagination is just dead. This is what he's talking about.
Right. Once you have tried this and the headline suddenly becomes visible out of the blur, ask yourself, where is the headline in the newspaper and your brain, or in some relationship between the newspaper and your brain? Tao, da, interacting. Where is it? Okay, that's the first exercise. Another exercise, go through your apartment or house, wherever you live,
This
and
is
pick up
funny.
12 to 15 objects, more or less at random. If you're looking at this on DVD, I suggest you turn it off right now and go get the objects so you won't stack them unconsciously to fit a theory. Okay, are you back?
These ones, if you want to come back to this video, I'm not gonna do any of these things right now. It's just listen to the examples he's saying.
Now you got 12 to 15 objects. Sit down at a coffee table or a dinner table where you got lots of space and separate them into one group on the left and one on the right. On the left, put all the red objects, and on the right, put all the non-red objects. Now you might find that some objects are partly red. Where do you put them? That's the beginning of destroying the either-or that's dominated Western philosophy. But as you separate them into the red and the not red, including the things that are half red and half blue, you don't know what.
This is talking about like the subjective nature of things. Like the mind wants to categorize things. The mind wants to say that this is exactly like this, where there's actually not this exact word to the universe. There's so much information that we only see a certain amount because we're fixating on it, whereas there's so many more details. Like, I promise you, this might sound like really fucking stupid. This might sound really stupid. I need to preface it, but like if you stare at a wall for like 5 minutes, you will start to notice every single imperfection about it. You will start to notice where the paint is chipped, where there might be a dent, where there might be plaster over the wall, like certain just weird marks on it. You know what I mean? It's like you'll start to notice more, and it's only when we choose to observe these things that they appear to us. And this is really the point he's trying to make with all of these examples. It's really trying to show you that you are being blinded because you're fixating on a certain aspect of things. You're fixating only on the known And this information is very useful because once you realize this fact, you can begin to shift your focus on different things. It's very interesting. You're really stupid. Okay, so Eddie, when you stare at the wall, start drooling as well.
what to do with, and then separate them a different way, things that float and things that don't float. If you have a balsa wood duck like I do, yeah, that's one thing that floats. If you got kids around, you probably got a rubber ball that will float. Otherwise, everything goes on the sides, non-floating. And then try another division, metallic things and non-metallic things. Using your own ingenuity, think of about 10 more ways of separating them. Notice how things move from left to right depending on how you separate them. And then ask, are the categories in the things as the medieval realist thought, or are they only in our heads as the nominalist thought, or are they some relationship between our heads and the things? And do that exercise.
It's this paradoxical nature that we must make sense of. Like there are set forms of things, but when we try to define them too much, they become rigid, they become arbitrary. But when we don't define anything, this is when it's too hard for us to understand. So it's the balance of being open and rigid at the same time, the yin, the yang.
It'll do you more good than hearing about it. Okay. Next exercise, go to a place with a lot of green growing things. Remember my rap about the great magician who makes the grass green? Look and see how many different shades of green you can see. And just remember that. The few Western intellectuals, they're East Coast intellectuals, heirs of the Western Occidental intellectual tradition, who get beyond black and white, say, well, there are shades of gray. Look and see how many shades of green you see. Newton divided the spectrum into red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. But that's the only convention that Newton invented. If you look, you see green has 20 shades.
So this is an interesting idea. Again, he's talking about classification and how we like to say one thing is like the other. I mean, maybe these are the same color. It's very dark, but like, are these the same colors of red? Obviously, there's different. Is this the same color? Even the lid and the bottle are different colors. Like, there's so much more when we begin to observe things. There's so much more when we begin to really look and really begin to fixate on these things. And it's our willingness to do this, our willingness to focus on different aspects of our lives, focus on different imagery, focus on different ideas that can begin to start changing who we are. This is really the secret of like why I'm showing you guys this because when you understand that what you put your attention to shifts the what you're seeing, shifts the reality that you're in, even if it's an infinitesimally small thing, it can still warp the way that you're living. It can still warp the way for the better. And it's just this is everything that I've been trying to explain, but it's only through this lens that I think the example is shown.
30 shades, 40 shades, depending on how much you look. If you go to a paint store, you'll find dozens of shades of red, dozens of shades of orange. The way we got this black-white dichotomy, I think, is because of all the years spent poring over books with
Left
white
foot is
print or
darker
white
than your
paper.
right foot.
Occasionally your eyes get so tired you see a gray blur. So this is how we arrived at the marvelous conclusion between the black.
How? Do you just like wear a sock on one foot and go to the beach or something?
Otherwise, occasionally there are grays. That is such bullshit. Look around you. The world is in glorious technicolor. See how many shades of green you can find, like I said. And
What's
remember
up,
the
Fluffy
master
Kitty? How's
makes all those
everything?
shades of green. Now get yourself a pair of shades or sunglasses or whatever you call them and look at the same view and see how it's changed. Did the change occur in you and the grass and the glasses are in some kind of relationship, a functional relationship? Now for the third one, which is only for the real hombres among you, the real tough guys, dare to be your own czar. Smoke a joint and look at the same scene against the only shades of green you see this time. Are the greens in you, in your brain,
Don't do this.
in the shrubbery and grass and trees, in
He
the
has an
plants?
interesting point,
Where
but
is
I
the
don't
green?
advocate for people to do that.
Okay, let's into that exercise. Next exercise, get a group of friends together and sit around and select somebody to be it. Whoever is it will take a watch and without telling you how much time, will say go. And eventually will say stop. Between go and stop, you should have paper and ink for this too. Between go and stop, see how many sounds you hear. As soon as he says stop, right, as soon as it says stop, write down as many sounds as you can remember. And see how
You're happy I'm live? Thank you, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. At least one person's happy I'm live.
the longest list in the group. Give them a round of applause for hearing more than anybody else, being the Sherlock Holmeses of the group, so to speak. And then see how many people in the group have heard sounds that weren't on that list. Now, whenever I've done this, I've always had groups of 30 to 300.
So what he's like, all of these things, if you haven't picked up on it, and if I haven't said it yet, is showing you that reality is subjective to each individual. Like we each experience things in a slightly different manner, and we agree to most details, so this makes it appear that we experience things the exact same way, but this is not the truth. Everyone inherently experiences stuff a little bit differently. And this is where differences in opinion appear. This is why people have different political opinions, different religious opinions. It's literally from these differences that create every sort of difference in the world.
And it always turns out almost every hand goes up. They heard sounds that weren't on it. In a small group, it might not be that dramatic, but I think you'll find everybody has at least one sound that wasn't on that list. This again illustrates the difference between the tuned-in universe and the imaginary objective universe we think is out there. Now comes the second part of the exercise, which is really interesting. After you've gone through that, ask how long it took for that exercise. Everybody write down on your paper how long you think that took, the listening exercise. And you will find quite a spectrum. I found people guessing as low as 15 seconds and as high as 4.5 minutes. And then don't let the person who did the timing tell you the correct time, because that's a mechanical arbitrary convention. Just remember, everybody creates their own time, just like you create your own greens, your own reds, your own purples.
I mean, you kind of see this in um, Einstein's special theory of relativity, where basically the different speed you go, it creates what's called time dilation. So the closer you get to the speed of light, what happens is basically you'll experience time at a much slower rate than everyone else. And you could extend it in essence to this, but it's going to be infinitesimally small amounts, but it does show the subjective nature of things. And like satellites have to account for this stuff. So it's like minor fraction of a second that satellites have to adjust for this day after day after day. But um, yeah.
Or if you're a disciple of Ayn Rand, you're on black and white and nothing else. Next exercise. Repeat the previous exercise, but try not to put any words on the sounds. Just listen to the sounds. Every time you perform a word, oh, that's a car in the distance, that's my own breathing, brush away the words. Try to get more and more into the sounds and away from the words. See what happens. If you feel a little stoned, or if you feel like you've gone into a hypnotic trance, the exercise has worked. Otherwise, take a course in meditation somewhere. Next exercise. Get the same group together and have everybody describe the room next to the room you're in, the room they came to get into the room you're in. See how many different.
Even if they describe it in the certain even if they describe it in a certain context, like it's somewhat similar, the word images that are going to be put through to an outside observer are all going to be different. So this is just further illustrating this idea.
Differences arise about the colors of the walls, the colors of the rugs, how many objects are in the room, what sort of objects are in the room, whether there were flowers in the room or not. And by the way, when you're doing the separation into classes exercise, divide them into living things and non-living things. And for instance, we got a flower back here which constitutes a living thing. No, it doesn't. It's an artificial flower. Never trust what you see. If you meet a Buddha on the road, kill him. Now, and I repeat one more time, it's much more profitable. You cannot believe how much more profitable to do these exercises rather than just hearing about them. Do them.
Should we do this at some point? We'll do like a live stream or no, we could do this in the Discord honestly at some point, or at least some of them. Maybe that's an interesting idea.
Then you will understand what I'm talking about. Otherwise, I think I'm talking about some objective universe that exists apart from us, which is a total fiction nobody's ever encountered. All we ever encounter is what we tune in. Now that you've done those exercises, I'm going to give you a really hard one. This is sort of a variation on my pontification, spectacles, testicles, brandy, cigars. This one goes the other way. You imagine a light around your genitals or within your body, whirling white light. Then you imagine one in your solar plexus, one in your throat, and one in your head. And you got all four of those lights glowing brightly.
He's talking about chakras right now. He won't say it because it has a religious spin on it. A lot of people view it as a religious thing, or if you're from the Eastern idea, that's not correct. But it's like nerve centers. I mean, science will one day catch up to these things. If I knew you personally, I could show you where they are. But it's
This requires some work in imagination and visualization. Keep the lights going so you can feel or increase in heat.
this is like if you want to understand what chakras are, this is why when you're heartbroken, you feel it in your heart. When you get some disappointing news, um when you get broken up with, when something bad goes wrong, when someone close to you dies, you feel it right here. Because your heart chakra right here is responsible for the idea of love. And when it gets thrown off, you'll feel the physical pain there.
And then make the
Oversimplifying it
light
so
flow
much.
through these four chakras or centers or whatever, energy pockets or imaginary entities, whatever you want to call them, with the words, there is no God. And stop and feel, experience a universe totally without God or anything remotely like God. Then move the white light here, and then here, and put in the words, accept God. And where the two crosses meet, you have your heart, what's called the heart chakra. Let that open and let light and
It's
love
right
pour
here.
out to all sentient beings, including the ones you
Go from
can't
your heart
stand,
to the middle of
especially
your
the ones you are
chest
most
so you
inclined to
find it.
regard with fear and loathing, such as maybe George Bush or Osama bin Laden or Fu Manchu or Arnold Schwarzenegger, whoever is your pet peeve in the whole world. Let the love pour out to all
When you say Arnold,
of them. Keep repeating this
I guess he was from California, maybe.
exercise so you really feel the love pouring out. Then where did the love come from? Did you create it? Was it there all the time, blocked by your usual preoccupations? And what does this do to your attitude towards the whole world? Finally, one final exercise. Divide everything you've ever tuned in into two categories, the material and the spiritual. And what you tuned in, of course, that includes what you've experienced, what you heard about. Everything anybody tells you, anything you read, that's part of the tuned in, you realize, I hope. Okay, divide it all up into the material and spiritual. And then go to a weekend intensive workshop on Zen Buddhism with lots of meditation exercises. And see if something's moved from the spiritual to the material, from the material to the spiritual. And remember, all through this weekend, keep remembering the greatest of all Zen koans. Somebody asked the Zen master, who is the Buddha? And he said, the one in the hall. I said, but the
Zen masters are the best answers to these types of
one in the
questions.
hall is a statue, a piece of wood. He said, that's right. So well, what is the Buddha? He said, the one in the hall. Okay.
Like the Zen parables are always like they always have like the funniest answers. Um, I don't remember a good one. There's one that is it's something along the lines of what is it like? There's this practice and the student can't get it right. So the master goes, well, if you can't get it right, then you're gonna have to jump off something, we'll just say. And he spends the next week trying to get it right, and he gets it right. But for years he couldn't get it quite down. He couldn't understand the lesson. I wish I remember what the lesson was, but it was oh fuck, I'm butchering it. We'll move on to something new. It was too long ago. I can't remember exactly what it was. Let me. Is there anything good? Watch this.
You can't transform yourself. You can't make yourself sane. You can't make yourself loving.
This looks
You
like
can't
AI.
make yourself unselfish. And yet it's absolutely necessary that we be that way. It's absolutely necessary.
What he's saying, you can't make yourself anything. It's the idea of you can't force yourself to be a certain way. You can't force the characteristic. You just have to be it. Um, it's I know I'm like speaking in parables. I know I'm speaking in paradoxes, but that's the secret of all these things. It's the paradox that you have to come to grips with. Like it's the slight changes we make every day that begin embodying us as a new person that shifts these changes. You know what I mean? Like when you're consciously trying to be a nice person, it doesn't mean as much as when you're just a nice person. Like, do you hold the door open for people because they say thank you? or do you hold the door open for people because it's easier for them? You know what I mean? It's like when it's all about the intentions, it's all about the motivations behind these things. Think of the person that is so afraid of criticism, is so afraid of being disliked that they are a happy-go-lucky person, that they're nice to absolutely everybody. Like, is that more impressive than the biggest, strongest person you know, like being the most kind soul deep down? You know what I mean? It's like it doesn't really mean anything because you're doing it for selfish means. It's fake, it's artificial. Whereas the true embodiment of the characteristic is what really is respectable.
Necessary. If we are going to hand over the direction of nature to nature, which is what it comes to, it's absolutely necessary that we let go of ourselves, and it can't be done. Not by anything that we call doing it, acting, willing, or even just accepting things. You can't do it. Why? Because you don't really exist as that kind of a separate ego or personality. It's just an idea based on a phony feeling. So when it comes down to it, it's shocking news for us, for the human race, for our pride. You're only making a mess by trying to put things straight.
You're only making a mess while trying to put things straight. This is the idea of resistance. This is the idea of people that um, they have certain misplaced anger. They put it into another source. They put it into a new relationship. Like a relationship breaks down. You don't resolve the issues, and then you start off with a new person and already start off on a bad foot. It's like a lot of times the compensations we try to make aren't the correct ones. They're forced. They're doing it out of necessity instead of out of desire.
You're trying to straighten out a wiggly world, and no wonder you're in trouble. So you can't do anything. So you can't transform yourself. And what can you do? What happens then if you actually realize you've come to a dead end? And the human race has come to a dead end, in my opinion. What then? Commit suicide? Or is there something else? What happens when you just wait? There's nothing you can do. You watch.
This is the idea of presence, observing, not partaking. Um, how do I explain this? Think of like the greatest performance you've ever had, whether it was a speech you were doing, whether it was a presentation, whether it was a job interview, whether it was you playing a sport, um, whatever it was, it didn't feel like there was anything stopping you. Like you took that ball, you shot it, it went in, and it didn't feel like you were acting. It felt like something was acting through you. You felt like you were observing your own self doing it. This is what he's talking about. It's talking about presence and having the idea of no mind, the idea of no thoughts. It's simply sitting back, watching, letting things develop, and then taking it from there.
And all you see is what goes on that is happening of itself. You're breathing, the wind is blowing, the trees are waving, your blood is circulating, your nerves are tingling. It's all going on of itself. But you know, that's you. That's the real you. The you that goes on of itself. It's not the symbol. It's not the person. It's
I still can't tell if this is AI or not. It's either a really shitty, grainy footage, or it's like an AI generated thing with his face on it.
you that's happening, as when you
I
breathe.
can't tell though.
Yes, you can get the feeling that I am breathing by shoving your breath, but your breath goes on day in and day out without your doing anything about it or even thinking of it. The same way your brain is functioning without your forcing it. So when you come to a dead end, and we are individually and socially now in 1971 at a dead end, this is the moment of which it is said man's extremity is God's opportunity.
I love the way he speaks. See, I've read his books. Don't get me wrong, I like his books. I like the stuff he says, but he's such a better speaker than he is an author. Oh. I think Jordan Peterson's that way as well. Maybe I don't know. Maybe Peterson is the because of the health complications. Maybe it's taking its toll on him. Like his when he talks about psychology, I'm like, this is so fucking cool. But when he talks about politics, I'm like, you're just like Ben Shapiro 2.0, and I don't fucking care. Like something I never thought I would see in like 2015, 2016 is Jordan Peterson be talking about the culture war, talking about like Gamergate stuff. Like it's so played out, so cringe. I guess there's so much money in it, but it's just like you got a mind like that. Use it for something that is useful. Use it to something that is going to transcend time. Like what are we talking about here in general? We're just talking about Alan Watts right now. I've been like all over the place tonight. We've been talking about a bunch of different things, mostly just consciousness and attention and what we put our attention to. And then I think I talked a little bit about what I thought about this book when I was first starting the stream.
because we have to stop. And when we stop, we find a world that is happening rather than being done, being shoved. And that happening, as distinct from doing, is our fundamental self. And our fundamental
Newbie, checking out your past vids. Thank you for being here. Um, so what he's talking about is it's called Wu Wei. I think that this is a Taoist idea. Most of his stuff comes purely from Taoism, and it's put in a Western context. You just watched this movie, Peaceful Warrior. What was it about? It already sounds interesting just from the title. Might be something I'll watch tonight, honestly. But he's talking about the idea of Wu Wei. It's the idea of no action. Like there's something in this world that when you do it, it doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel like a job. It doesn't like live up to however hard it is. So like for me right now, like if I stream for 4 hours, it doesn't unless I start losing my voice, it's not difficult. Now you get me talking for 4 hours like with someone I don't like, it's horrible. But like what I'm doing right now, there's no effort behind it. There's no resistance behind it. There's no I need to stop. I need to do this. You know what I mean? It's like I just enjoy doing it. Same thing when I train jujitsu. Same thing when I'm in the gym. Like we all have things that we love about our day, and it doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel like you have to be here. Whereas, like, let's say you have a job you don't like. Every single second you're there, every single second you're doing the work, you're just like, this fucking sucks. I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. Like that's this idea. Like we're forcing ourselves to do things that aren't bringing us fulfillment, and not saying that you can do this right away. But the ultimate goal is getting up to the place where you find something that drives you day after day after day after day to be happy. Like I don't know about you, but like I was never told as a kid that like you should find something that makes you happy. I was told I should find something that I can make a lot of money doing. And it's like because I was on that wavelength for so long, because I was on that idea for so long, like it led me to where I am, and I'm gonna have to do a lot more work to get to the place where I want to be. You know what I mean? Removing junk in our head. Yes, yes. Okay. Is it a is it like a documentary or is it a like a narrative movie? Because I'd be interested to see how that happens in a like an actual movie, not a documentary.
self is not something just inside the skin. It's everything around us with which we connect. When you look out of your eyes at nature happening out there, you're looking at you. I'm not going to say what we should do from then on, but simply that before we think of doing anything in this critical situation, we realize the completely illusory nature of the beings that we think we are, and get back again.
It's an underrated movie. I'll check it out. I'm gonna put it on my Googles just so I remember it. What is it called? Peaceful Warrior. It sounds like something I would love. Okay, yeah, I'll check that out. I walk 4.1 miles to from work. It's like meditation for me. Yeah. Dude, walking is one of the most underrated forms of meditation. There was a period in the summer when it was nice out that I really wouldn't like meditate normally. I would just take my shirt off and walk around for like 2, 3 hours, and it was like the best part about my day. Nothing else compared to those moments of silence. I'd put a book on. I just think about things. I would observe things about my neighborhood that I've lived in my entire life that I've never seen before. You know what I mean? It's like you never notice how cool looking some of the houses are. You never notice, oh, every single house on my street has shutters on it. Like, isn't that weird? You know what I mean? It's like it's weird that every house has the exact same style. Like just little things like that that you pick up and you see a whole new part of things. The journey is what brings us happiness. It won't blow your mind, but it'll show you the importance. No, I mean, isn't that the same thing though? Like, it's not supposed to be like the answer isn't something that is insane. The answer is something that we've had in front of us the whole time, but we haven't noticed it. That's really the aspect of things.
Then, to the beings that we really are, which includes all this outside world, no longer left outside.
Should watch another one. I can find a short one. It takes me forever to get through these videos though.
Suppose you're God. Suppose you have all time, all eternity, and all power at your disposal. What would you do? I believe you'd say to yourself after a while, man, get lost. It's like asking another question, which is supposing you were given the power to dream any dream you wanted to dream
I feel like we already have that power, but
every night. Naturally, you could dream any span of time. You could dream 75 years of time in one night, 100 years of time in one night, 1,000 years of time in one night. And it could be anything you wanted. You make up your mind before you went to sleep, tonight I'm going to dream of so-and-so. Well, naturally, you would start out by fulfilling all your wishes. You would have all the pleasures you could imagine, the most
you
marvelous...
wouldn't want all the power. Yeah, I wouldn't either. I feel like it would get for like a few days it'd be awesome. For a few days it'd be cool to just like be able to just see everything cool in the world, go experience everything I want to experience. Like it'd be cool to like retire my family, all that kind of stuff. But like at a certain point when you remove the struggle from life, you remove any sort of lesson you will learn. Like it's only through deep sorrow that we can experience deep joy. I don't really get when people have something go wrong in their lives and they go like things are going to continue to get worse. They might continue to get worse, but like the more things you experience now, the more you can appreciate the good times later on.
Meals, the most entrancing love
It's so
affairs,
loud.
the most romantic journeys. You could listen to music such as no mortal has heard and see landscapes beyond our wildest dreams. And for several nights, oh, maybe for a whole month of nights, you would go on that way, having a wonderful time. But then after a while, you'd begin to think, well, I've seen quite a bit. Let's spice it up. Let's have a little adventure.
The
And
God's
therefore, you would
envious
dream.
because we live our lives knowing that any day can be ours. Yes, yes. This is like the Stoic idea of death. Like the Stoics would approach death as if it was a second. Because the day you begin to recognize your mortality is the day your days begin to have more meaning. There's a sentiment that Seneca had about old age, and it was basically saying that like every second that passes, his time gets more valuable because he has less of it. And as his death is nearing, as his old age is approaching, like every interaction he has is one that he has to make the most of. It was just so interesting. I think Seneca is the best Stoic philosopher out of all of them, but yeah.
Of yourself being threatened by all sorts of dangers. You would rescue princesses from dragons. You would perhaps engage in notable battles. You would be a hero. And then, as time went on, you would dare yourself to do more and more outrageous things. And at some point in the game, you would say, tonight, I am going to dream in such a way that I don't know that I'm dreaming. So that
Yeah.
you would take the experience
I know what he's building. This is when this comes full circle, you're gonna be like, wow.
of the dream for complete reality. And what a shock when you woke up. And you really scare yourself. And then, on successive nights, you might dare yourself to experience the most extraordinary things just for the contrast when you woke up. You could, for example, dream yourself in situations of
He's probably gonna say that this is what we're doing right now. This is exactly what we're experiencing right now.
extreme poverty, disease, agony. You could, as it were, work on the vibration of suffering to its most intense point, and then suddenly, whoop, wake up.
Is he smoking a cigarette or enjoying it? I just realized I'm gonna go to the bathroom, but I'll be back in a second. Not sure if anyone's still here, but I'm gonna like this video anyway, so.
And find it was, after all, nothing but a dream and everything perfectly okay. And you would say, wow, man, that was a gas. Well, how do you know that that's not what you're doing already? You, sitting there with all your problems, with all your whole complicated life situation, listening to me, it may just be the very dream you decided to get into. If you like it, crazy. If you don't like it, what fun it'll be when you wake up.
That was awesome, actually. That was great, yeah. Um, this is the idea of one of the most interesting concepts in the Bible is the idea that we create what we see, the idea that what we ask for, what we believe to become true, becomes true. Um, basically, the law of assumption. As man thinketh in his heart, so hath he shall be. The kingdom of heaven is within you. Um, if we were all created by God, does that mean we have part of God in us? And I think the more you observe the spiritual aspects of things, the more you see this in everything. The more you see it in Taoism, the more you see it in Buddhism, um, even what is it, Hinduism? I think I haven't studied Hinduism well enough, but it's all there. And it's so interesting to see it from Alan Watts' perspective because I I would classify him as a Taoist. That's how I would classify his beliefs. But it was a great thought exercise with this ending your inner civil war. Okay.
And I want to read a passage from one of his lectures, which I think is
This video is awesome. I've watched this before. We'll speed it up because there's no video. Because I know people have short attention spans.
one of the greatest things he ever wrote, and which has been a very marvelous thing for me. It was in a lecture delivered to a group of clergy in Switzerland, a considerable number of years ago, and he writes as follows. People forget that even doctors have moral scruples, and that certain patients' confessions are hard even for a doctor to swallow. Yet the patient does not feel himself accepted, unless the very worst in him is accepted too.
The patient doesn't feel accepted unless the very worst of himself is accepted. This is the idea of accepting your biggest downfalls, your biggest, for lack of a better word, sins. I don't really like using that word because it has such a negative connotation, but to sin in Hebrew means to misstep. Whenever anyone puts shame on the word sin, it does more damage than it does good. And you need to understand like the redemptive power of forgiveness, not just for other people, but for yourself. Like if you cling on to something that happened to you, if you cling on to something and say it's the reason why you're here, then it will forever have a hold on you. But when you drop that judgment, when you drop whatever it is that you did when you messed up, if you get past that, that's when it becomes redemptive. That's when it becomes something that you can move past and you can move past and have learned from the experience. But until that, it's forever going to hold you back. It's only upon forgiveness for yourself when you can be forgiven by God. That's the basic essence of it.
No one can bring this about by mere words. It comes only through reflection, and through the doctor's attitude towards himself and his own dark side. If the doctor wants to guide another, or even accompany him a step of the way, he must feel with that person's psyche. He never feels it when he passes judgment. Whether he puts his judgments into words or keeps them to himself makes not the slightest difference. To take the opposite position and to agree with the patient offhand is also of no use. Feeling comes only through unprejudiced objectivity. This sounds almost like a scientific precept, and it could be confused with a purely intellectual, abstract attitude of mind. But what I mean is
One of the greatest things that you'll ever learn is that to judge others is misplaced self. When you judge others, this is you saying there's something lacking in you that you can't forgive. Because a healthy mind, a healthy conscience has no time to judge any. This is the idea of let he who hath no sin cast the first stone. Like, how dare you harm someone else? How dare you condemn someone else if you haven't purified your soul first? And the secret is that once you purify your soul, once you become redeemed, once you get past every single detracting moment in your life, once you get past every sin, that's when you no longer want to do anything towards anyone else. Because you understand that they too have to go through this experience. They too have to go through this alchemical process of transmuting themselves into something greater. I'm like trying to find words that are going to make sense, but I have to use these ones because it's just that's really what it is. Like this is just the idea of alchemy, that the purification of your soul into something greater. And the moment that your soul is pure is the moment that you will never take up any sort of judgment, take up any sort of harm against anyone else. This is the idea of it, and that's the idea of that exact reasoning. But
something quite different. It is a human quality, a kind of deep respect for the facts, for the man who suffers from them, and for the riddle of such a man's life. The truly religious person has this attitude.
yeah, most people don't
He knows
change.
that God has brought all sorts of strange and inconceivable things to pass, and seeks in the most curious...
Most people don't change and never will change. And it's just the reality that you have to accept. It's just something that you have to understand. The one thing you can hope for is that you can be the inspiration for that change. Like it's so much better to act in front of someone and say, someone's doing something wrong, and instead of, fighting back, you turn the other cheek. I think that's one of the greatest examples. It's like we show we show like how people should be through our actions, not through our words. No matter what you say to me, you're probably not going to change my opinion on a lot of the things I believe. But let's say you live a better life than me. Let's say you have a more rewarding life than me. Like maybe I'll look at you, maybe I'll look towards your example and be like, what does this guy do? Well, I'll do it too. That's the idea of it.
Various ways to enter a man's heart. He therefore senses in every
Gandhi said, "Be the change you want to see in this world." I think that's one of the greatest quotes ever because it shows the power an individual has. It shows the power an individual has to change absolutely everything in the world by first changing themselves. It's one of the most beautiful sentiments you'll ever hear, and it's one of the most true ones you will find as well. Like I would very much struggle to find anyone that could disagree with that. I truly will.
everything the unseen presence of the divine will. This is what I mean by unprejudiced objectivity. It is a moral achievement on the part of the doctor, who ought not to let himself be repelled by sickness and corruption. We cannot change anything unless we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate.
We cannot change anything unless we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate. Again, these are beautiful quotes. Be the person before expecting. Yes. And the beautiful thing about that is like by the time you become that person, it's genuinely have already like things probably have already changed at that point. You know what I mean? Like Gandhi spent his entire life trying to work on himself and he ended up changing the world for a lot of people. And it's like that's what one man could do. Especially like who was this one guy to go about and get India's independence from Britain? You know what I mean? It's like the single individual that is focused on something and that is focused on fixing themselves first can do wonders. I mean, even look at Thoreau. Thoreau is one of the greatest examples of um what being an individual can do for you. Now I understand the deeper meaning of what Gandhi said. Yeah, no problem, man. See, the thing with me is I don't care about the physical examples. I care about the spiritual ones. So it's like to me, Thoreau is one of the most inspiring people ever because Thoreau basically showed the entire world that when you simplify your life, that's where you can appreciate everything. That's the entire point of Walden. The entire point of Walden is not to go out and live in the woods. It's to simplify your life. It's to get you away from the worldly desires so that you can live with the bare minimum and you can be happy because it's only when you have the bare minimum when you can appreciate it. You can't appreciate a fancy car because the minute you buy the fancy car, you drive it off a lot, it lost its value. It's no longer as much of a status symbol. You see someone drive by with a faster car and you don't appreciate it. Whereas if you just have a reliable car that gets you around, that doesn't cost you a lot, that you really don't have to upkeep that much, like I promise you, you're going to appreciate that reliability. You're going to appreciate that it gets the job done. You're going to appreciate that you can drive this Forerunner or this Corolla or whatever car it is that just gets the job done and you don't have to worry about it. Like that's the idea of Walden. That's the idea of Thoreau. Thoreau as well was an example for I think Gandhi looked at Thoreau when Thoreau has this really good essay called Civil Disobedience. And in essence, civil disobedience is Thoreau doesn't want to have to partake in things that he doesn't agree with. He doesn't want to have to vote in elections where he considered himself an independent voter, but in America, there's a two-party system, and if you're an independent voter, you can't vote in the primary. So the people that you have to vote for have already been pre-selected by partisan actors. And that's what he was pissed off about. And another thing he was really against was the Mexican American War, which was basically a war for profit. It wasn't a war for any justifiable means. So he refused to pay his poll tax and he was willing to rot away in jail because he was willing to show people how, one act of one man can make such difference. And this is really what inspired Martin Luther King Jr. to go about using civil disobedience, going about using these nonviolent methods to really show how erroneous the rules in the South were. It's just so inspiring when you look into Thoreau. And it's the best part about Thoreau is he doesn't tie himself to any political party. He doesn't tie himself to any sort of political movement. So like I'm not saying you would disagree with Martin Luther King Jr., but I'm sure there's people that like throughout history have done similar things that you're like, well, this person was about this. I don't necessarily agree with this. I don't necessarily agree with this point. Like, I'm sure there's some political take that Martin Luther King had that I don't agree with 1,000%. But Thoreau was about the personal experience, the individual experience, and that's what I love about him.
it oppresses. I am the oppressor of the person I condemn, not his friend and fellow sufferer. I do not in the least mean to say that we must never pass judgment when we desire to help and improve. But if the doctor wishes to help a human being, he must be able to accept him as he is. And he can do this in reality only when he has already seen and accepted himself as he is.
This is the same thing in relationships. So think of any relationship that's broken down. You saw an idealized image of this person. You didn't see who they really were. You didn't see their faults. You didn't see the things that they struggle with. And because you didn't see any of these aspects, you held them up to a standard that's impossible. And the standard you're holding them up to is like a angelic archetype of what you believe a woman to be. And let's say you don't get the support that this idealistic individual gives you, like you got to treat them as a person. You got to accept them for who they are, because only when you can accept their faults, when you can accept the things they can't quite fulfill about yourself, like that's when things can work. It's you have to look so much deeper than just the surface level of things, and you have to understand the idea of perspective, the idea that each and every person has their own unique experience. We all have our own history. We all have our own beliefs that have been shaped by everything we've seen up until now. And these beliefs justify our worldview. These beliefs justify our actions in every single moment. And just how strongly you believe that you were right in that moment, that person also believes so strongly. And it's getting around this. It's coming to an agreement. It's understanding this perspective and saying, like, you know what, maybe that there's a point there. Maybe they have a right to feel this, and I can ease up on this. And I can say, like, hey, sorry, I was just stressed out, I was just angry. Like, this is just read chapter 1 through 14 of Power Awareness. What fuck? Just read chapter 1 through 14 of of Awareness after watching your video. How'd you like it? I think this is I think this is one of the best books ever written on the power of mind. Um, I don't know how Neville Goddard does it, because a lot of the chapters are like 1 or 2 pages, and they they feel like they have so much more depth in them. I've read a lot of Neville Goddard. I haven't read all of his stuff, but I think this is his best one. This is the one that I read where I was like, everything's starting to click and everything's starting to really make sense. Really shifted how I view visualization, and it's pushing me to stop daydreaming and instead use that energy to bring it to the present. You don't necessarily have to stop daydreaming, but instead of daydreaming in the sense of like, oh, this is where I'll be in the future, bring it to the now. Feel those emotions now. Feel what you're feeling in that imagined state now. That's all you need to focus on. Don't necessarily stop daydreaming, but just focus on, like, instead of saying I want this, I'll have this in the future, say I have it now. Feel I have it now. That's the secret.
Perhaps this sounds very simple, but simple things are always the most difficult. In actual life, it requires the greatest art to be simple, and so acceptance of oneself is the essence of the moral problem and the acid test of one's whole outlook on life. That I feed the beggar, that I forgive an insult, that I love my enemy in the name of Christ, all these are undoubtedly great virtues. What I do unto the least of my brethren, that I do unto Christ. But what if I should discover that the least amongst them all, the poorest of all beggars, the most impudent of all offenders, yea, the very fiend himself, that these are within me?
The very fiend himself, that these are within me. That's like the end of it all. That's the end of introspection. The end of introspection is the recognition that the characteristics you hate the most in others, you have in yourself. You have the same characteristics, and it's accepting these characteristics and using them for good. Emerson said that every single trait has both benefits and defects, whether it's a good trait, whether it's a bad trait. Think of the best looking people in the world. They're usually the most vain. Think of some of the ugliest people in the world, you know. They usually have to work a lot harder. They usually achieve a lot more. Like there's no such thing as a bad characteristic. It's just how you use it. When you imagine your desired reality, do you imagine it from the first person perspective, like what you would? So you can do either. Um, the bottom line is that you just have to feel it. The bottom line is it's just how intense of an emotional state you create, and there's not one tactic that is going to be more powerful. It's just the experience and the feeling that you can get from that. And then once you have that experience, um, once you have that feeling, then taking inspired action. And it's not like the moment I feel like I have achieved my dreams, I turn on the camera. It's the moment I feel like I've achieved my dreams and I want to turn on the camera when I do it. That's the secret. It's continuing to be in these states, thinking from the end, and then getting the inspiration from that state. That's the secret to it.
And that I myself stand in need of the arms of my own kindness, that I myself am the enemy who must be loved, what then? Then, as a rule, the whole truth of Christianity is reversed. There is then no more talk of love and long-suffering. We say to the brother within us, Raka, and condemn and rage against ourselves. We hide him from the world. We deny ever having met this least among the lowly in ourselves, and had it been God himself who drew near to us in this despicable form, we should have denied him 1,000 times before a single cock had crowed. Healing may be called, Jung says, a religious problem. In the sphere of social or national relations, the state of suffering may be civil war, and this state is to be cured by the Christian virtue of forgiveness and love of one's enemies.
Forgiveness and love of one's enemies is self-love. Recognizing the characteristics you don't like in others, forgiving them for these things, forgiving them for feeling these ways, and then turning that thought inward, looking into why you don't like these things, looking into why these characteristics strike you as so evil, so reprehensible, so immoral.
That which we recommend with the conviction of good Christians is applicable to external situations. We must also apply inwardly in the treatment of neurosis. This is why modern man has heard enough about guilt and sin. He is sorely beset by his own bad conscience, and wants rather to know how he is to reconcile himself with his own nature.
The idea of guilt and sin breed more guilt and sin. The guilt we associate with the idea of sin has done more evil for the world than anything else. The idea that we sin and we can't overcome it and we can't forgive ourselves and we have to stay vigilant and it's going to happen again and this and like I literally created anxiety in myself saying those things. Okay. I don't know if you felt it in yourself, but me saying those words literally made me feel lesser of myself. What good does it do to linger on something that you can't fix? What good does it do to linger on something that is in the past? The past is set in stone. All you can do is move to the future. All you can do is accept the past and move forward in a new direction. If you didn't like where you were headed, change it. It's that simple. Like take everything that's happened to you and take it as an experience. Take it as a room to something to grow from. When Edison failed to create the light bulb 10,000 times, how do you think he framed this in his mind? Do you think he viewed himself as a failure 10,000 times? No. He said in an interview, he said, I didn't fail 10,000 times. I found out 10,000 ways not to create a light bulb. It's the experience that we learn from. It's the experience that we grow from. If we didn't have experience of failure, then what is an experience of success? It's nothing because we don't appreciate it.
How he is to love the enemy in his own heart and call the wolf his brother. The modern man does not want to know in what way he can imitate Christ, but in what way he can live his own individual life, however meager and uninteresting it may be. It is because every form of imitation seems to him deadening and sterile that he rebels against the force of tradition that would hold him to well-trodden ways. All such roads for him lead in the wrong direction. He may not know it, but he behaves as if his own individual life were God's special will which must be fulfilled at all costs. This is the source of his egoism, which is one of the most tangible evils of the neurotic state. But the person who tells him he is...
Your ego is a disassociation from yourself. Your ego is the idea that you're your accomplishments, you're your bank account, you're everything that someone can about your material self. And your ego is the farthest thing from you. It's what's been created throughout your entire life. The true you, the you you were born with, is the encapsulation of everything that makes you up. Your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings, your spirit, your mind. Everything that can't be perceived is so much more important and so much more valuable than your ego. Your ego is the least of your worries, and the moment you disassociate from your ego is the moment you transcend humanity.
He is too egoistic, has already lost his confidence, and rightly so.
The complete the complete dissolution of your ego is when you become a Buddha-like figure. If you completely disassociate from yourself, this is when you have access to the infinite. This is when you have access to everything. Um, this is what Osho believes himself to have achieved. This is what Buddha believed himself to have achieved. Lao Tzu. Some say Jesus Christ was, well, I mean, you have to assume he's disassociated from the self because he is God. But yeah, it's this is the idea of what Jung is talking about, bringing the unconscious to the conscious, combining the two and creating something more.
For that person has driven him still further into his neurosis. If I wish to effect a cure for my patients, I am forced to acknowledge the deep significance
Schools
of
should
their
teach
egoism.
that failing is good. Yeah, but that would make the school system effective. That's not the point of the school system. The point of the school system is to create better workers. It's not to create philosophers. It's not to create individuals. It's to sacrifice the individual for the good of society. Um, it's not a malicious idea either. It's just the people that organize these things don't value the individual. They don't value individuality. They think that the good of society should always be put first, but the good of society is not good for the individual. It has to be a balance. It has to be a push-pull. And right now we're in an era where there's no push-pull. Right now we're in an era where there's just pull. So
I should be blind indeed if I did not recognize it as a true will of God. I must even help the patient to prevail in his egoism. If he succeeds in this, he estranges himself from other people. He drives them away, and they come to themselves, as they should, for they were seeking to rob him of his sacred egoism. This must be left to him, for it is his strongest and healthiest power. It is, as I have said, a true will of God, which sometimes drives him into complete isolation. However wretched this state may be, it also stands him in good stead, for in this way alone can he get to know himself and learn what an invaluable treasure is the love of his fellow beings.
I love this speech so much.
It is, moreover, only in the state of complete abandonment and loneliness that we experience the helpful powers of our own natures. When one has several times seen this development at work, one can no longer deny that what was evil has turned to good, and that what seemed good has kept alive the forces of evil. The archdemon...
What was evil has kept alive the forces of good. What was good has kept alive the forces of evil. I think I messed that quote up, but it stays the same. It's the idea of balance. It's the idea of you can't have good without evil. You can't have evil without good. It's the constant push-pull of life. It's the constant paradox of life that we must grasp and we must understand, because it's only when we understand something, it's only when we quantify something that we can begin to fix the problem.
The demon of egoism leads us along the royal road to that ingathering which religious experience demands. What we observe here is a fundamental law of life, enantiodromia, or conversion into the opposite. And it is this that makes possible the reunion of the warring halves of the personality, and thereby brings the civil war to an end. End of quote.
One of my favorite Nietzsche quotes is, in order for a tree's leaves to reach its roots must be in hell. And this is the observation that until you come to grips with your most evil characteristics, your most unpleasant characteristics, you cannot ascend to where you should be. And this is the idea that if you have something bothering you, if there's something holding you back, you'll never be able to reach the absolute peak, because time and time again, the things that you're ignoring are coming back to bite you in the end. I think we'll do one more video. I don't have to go per se. I just have to eat before I go to bed. I'll just cook something quick. That's fine. It's no big deal. Let me see if there's anything. This is going to be a good video. I can sum up this video in 30 seconds. Carl Jung believed that you should bring the conscious or the unconscious to the conscious. Buddha would say you should destroy the unconscious. Mm, let's see what this is.
Amazingly destructive. Why you aren't. We aren't better because we want to be. Because the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Because all the do-gooders in the world, whether they're doing good for others or doing it for themselves, are troublemakers. On the basis of kindly let me help you or you'll drown, said the monkey, putting the fish safely up a tree.
That's a perfect analogy. And then again, this goes back to the idea we were talking about, be the change you want to see in this world. What does it do to help people that don't believe they're struggling? You know what I mean? It's only when they recognize what's going wrong that you can offer that hand to help them out. Because generally, we're going to try to help people from our perspective, but we don't understand everything that's going on. We don't understand what's exactly going to help them, and nor should we believe to understand what exactly an individual needs. The individual is so complex; it's its own universe. Like you must treat everyone differently. It's very. I think we can
We white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, British, German,
en
American,
masse help everyone.
have been on a rampage for the past 100 or more years to improve the world. We have given the benefits of our culture, our religion, our technology to everybody, except perhaps the Australian Aborigines.
And it's like at what cost? You know what I mean? Like it's progress, but does it make society better? Do families stick together like they used to? Do we have um escalating crime rates? Are things getting worse? You know what I mean? It's like we we push technology forward, but it came at the expense of humans in a lot of ways. I mean, look at what social media has done to so many young people. Look how fucked up their perspective of themselves have become because they see someone that uses filters and plastic surgery to look absolutely perfect on Instagram. And meanwhile, you see them walking by in person, you're like, that's a fucking goblin. But like, there's little girls that will forever have a warped perspective of themselves. Like, dude, my girlfriend's literally perfect, but she like fixes herself in the mirror all day long. I'm like, I don't. I don't think you need to do that. Like I was literally like looking at it today. I'm like, what could you be possibly fixing? Like there's nothing, no acne, no blemish on your face, but you're concerned about how you like it's just very weird to me the effects that these things are having on people.
And we have insisted that they receive the benefits of our culture, even our political styles, our democracy. You better be democratic, or we'll shoot you. And having conferred these blessings,
That's the funniest thing ever. Like the idea that democracy is a perfect system, the idea that democracy, which I think it was Alexander Hamilton, is mob rule, and when you have a majority that is unjust, the injustice gets put towards the minority. It's very weird how we don't really grasp that. No political system is inherently fair. No political system is inherently going to be 1,000% non-oppressive. Very weird to me.
all over the place, we wonder why everybody hates us. See, because sometimes doing good to others, and even doing good to oneself, is amazingly destructive. Because it's full of conceit. How do you know what's good for other people? How do you know what's good for you? If you say you want to improve, then you ought to know what's good for you. But obviously you don't, because if you did, you would be improved.
The only way to improve is to learn about yourself. That's the only way to improve. The only way to make any progress on yourself is to open yourself up, open up the book that is you, and evaluate the things that make you happy. Evaluate the things that bring you the most peace. Remove the stimulus from your life that is negatively affecting you and only put your time and energy to the good things. That's the only thing you can do. Everything else is nonsense. Everything else is BS. Maybe there's tactics, maybe there's tricks that can help you get to this, but it's only through self-knowledge, self-awareness where you can direct yourself in the right way.
So we don't know. It's like the problem of geneticists, which they face today. I went to a meeting of geneticists not so long ago where they gathered in a group of philosophers and theologians and said, now look here, we need help. We now are on the verge of figuring out how to breed any kind of human character we would want to have. We can give you saints, philosophers, scientists, great politicians, anything you want. Just tell us. What kind?
I was going to say this, but there's the idea that saints create the most sinners. That in the presence of saints is also the to do something wrong. I mean, think of like the person that you knew in high school that was like extremely religious, never went out to parties, never do anything. Like people would like make fun of these people just because they were a healthy individual, just because they seemingly didn't do anything wrong. And like there was almost like a protest against this. It's very weird. Like there's one dude that I can especially point to that I knew that was like probably had the best parents ever because this dude literally did nothing wrong. And it's like people would just hate on him because of this. People would just not like him because he was so perfect. It was very weird.
kind of human beings ought we to breed?
Let's say he was perfect. Like he definitely had
So,
some weird
I said,
characteristics, but
how will those
morally
of us
speaking, he
who are
was pretty
genetically
respectable.
unregenerate make up our minds what genetically generate people might be? Because I'm afraid very much that our selection of virtues may not work. It may be like, for example, this new kind of high-yield grain which is made and which is becoming ecologically destructive. When we interfere with the processes of nature and breed efficient plants and efficient animals, there's always some way in which we have to pay for it. And I can well see that eugenically...
This is a idea of Thomas Sowell. I'm not sure if he meant this in a philosophical sense, but he said there's no such solutions, there's only trade-offs. And I don't know if he meant for this quote to be so deep, but this is the truth in anything. The truth is there is no such thing as a solution. Any solution you come up with will some way affect something else in the negative way. And it's just being okay with those trade-offs. It's just being okay with whatever it is that's going to go wrong. And this is an idea that's not understood in any technological sphere, any sort of biological sphere, because I mean, we'll get all of these medicines that purport to help people out, purport to help out some of their brain function, whether it's balancing your brain chemistry, whether it's, curing one symptom but creating more symptoms. Like it's like I don't think we necessarily recognize the trade-offs we're making in a lot of these decisions, and this is what leads to the state of the world that we're in today. Like, I mean, think of like the pharmaceutical ads you see where it's like, oh, this one drug cures this minor issue, but it may cause death, it may cause heart attack, it may cause diabetes, it may cause this, it may cause that, it may cause this. It's like the fucking side effects are longer than the entire ad. Like, the ad started out with a guy like unhappy, and then 2 seconds in he's smiling. Like, if it just ended there, maybe I'd take the drug, but I'm not risking the a billion things that could happen as a result of it. You know what I mean? It's so weird how we don't focus on these ideas. We always just like the quick fix. We like to look at whatever immediate success we get instead of looking at the results of things. I mean, one of the most horrific things that ever happened in the history of the world is Agent Orange getting dropped on Vietnam for absolutely no reason. And like people to this day are being born with birth defects, but you will never hear about this because nobody cares. You know what I mean? It's like it's so horrific. It's so sad. And like, oh yeah, but this war that was unjustified, that we unjustly got into, that the entire American population was against, we needed to win this war, so we needed to do these things. Like, what the fuck? And I don't get this decision making, but you know what? It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate being inquisitive. It's unfortunate questioning things because when you begin to question things, that's when you begin to see the cracks in the foundation, and not saying it keeps me up at night, but it keeps me from being one of those people that goes, "Yeah, make America great again. Yeah, oh yeah, I'm behind." Like, no, I'm not. I'm not behind anything. I don't believe in anything. I don't put any sort of faith in any one idea because in every single ideology, in any sort of belief system that's limited, it limits the individual. At a certain point of any sort of organization, I have to curtail my own opinion for the leader. I have to put the leaders whatever they want ahead of everything else. It's like, no, I want to put my own ideas first. I want to put my own opinions first. I'd rather believe in nothing than believe in anything. It's such a liberating mindset, but I don't know if I can properly explain it. It's basically a Taoist, not Buddhist, absurdist worldview.
produced human beings might be dreadful. We could have a plague of virtuous people. Do you realize that? Any animal considered in itself is virtuous.
I think this encapsulates like every single political movement. Like people that want to feel like they're doing good and want to get behind something but not actually do anything. You know what I mean? It's like if you devote your whole life to something and you actually make change, I'm impressed with you. But if you just purport to stand for something that's popular, like you're just part of the masses. You didn't do anything. You're just part of the system. you're part of the system that continues to get the wrong answers and the wrong solutions to these things. Like you're contributing to the problem, you're not making it better.
It does its thing, but in crowds, they're awful. Like a crowd of ants or locusts on the rampage. They're all perfectly good animals, but it's just too much. I could imagine a perfectly pestiferous mass of 1,000,000 saints. So I said to these people, look, there's the only thing you can do. Just be sure that a vast variety of human beings is maintained. Don't please breed us down to a few excellent types. Excellent for what? We never know how circumstances are going to change and how our need for different kinds.
Dude, the eugenics movement is one of like the most horrific things in human history, and it just gets passed over. Like I'm pretty sure it happened in America too. It's absolutely haunting, and it's like, how dare anyone say what like the traits we want to carry on to future generations are. I'm not going to talk about it, but there's a yeah, it's too dark. I'm not even going to bring it up. It's so fucked up what people do in this world.
Kinds of people changes. At one time, we may need very individualistic and aggressive people. At another time, we may need very cooperative, team-working people. At another time, we may need people who are full of interest in dexterous manipulation of the external world. At another time, we may need people who explore into their own psychology and are introspective. There is no knowing. But the more varieties and the more skills we have, obviously, the better. So
This is the true idea of diversity. This is what diversity should be, but non-diversity is just a surface level thing. And that's what I hate about this world. Like we'll talk about diversity all day, but people look different, but there's no different ideas. If these people preserve their culture and brought their new cultural perspective to things, I'm all for it. But time and time again, I just see surface level diversity, and it pisses me off because it's the culmination of different ideas into one singular idea which advances humanity. It's not the culmination of different appearances. And I think this is one of the biggest disservices to humanity, saying that this one thing is good and not understanding what is actually good.
So you see, here again, the problem comes out in genetics. We do not really know how to interfere with the way the world is. The way the world actually is an enormously complex, interrelated organism. The same problem arises in medicine because the body is a very complexly interrelated organism. And if you look at the body in a superficial way, you may see there's something wrong with it. Here's chickenpox. And there's spots that itch that come out all over the place. Well, you might say, well, spots are there, cut them off. So you kill the bug. Well, then you find you've got real problems. Because you have to introduce some bugs to kill the bug. It's like bringing rabbits into Australia. And that starts going all over the place and getting out of hand. Well, then you think, well, now wait a minute. It wasn't the bugs in the blood. There are bugs all over the place. What was wrong with this person that his blood system suddenly became vulnerable?
One of the funniest things ever. Look, so real quick. This is the funniest thing ever. Won the war. After 6 days with emu fatalities in the low hundreds, the shooting was temporarily halted the abandoned few weeks. So basically, the emu wars. This is one of the funniest things I've ever learned about. The Australian government declared war on emus and moths, and it's like it's something like their feathers are like bulletproof or something. It was just this is one of the funniest events in history, and it just shows like it sums up the entire country of Australia perfectly. Like going to war with emus and losing.
Vulnerable to those particular bugs. His resistance wasn't up. Therefore, what you should have given him was not an antibiotic, but vitamins. Okay, so we're going to build up his resistance. But resistance to what? I mean, you may build up resistance to this and this and this class of bugs, but then there's another one that loves that situation and comes right in. See, we always look at the human being medically in bits and pieces, because we have heart specialists, lung specialists, bone specialists, nerve specialists, and so on. And they each see the human being from their point of view. There are a few generalists, but they realize the human body is so complicated that no one mind can understand it. And furthermore, supposing we do succeed in healing all.
Science can't even explain consciousness, but they want to tell you exactly how everything works. It's like you can't explain how the stomach works or consciousness. Like how can you give me such a blanket diagnosis? How can you say with absolute certainty that this is going to make me better? It's very frustrating the forces behind the medical industry and how matter of fact they are about things. I mean, 50, 60 years ago, doctors were saying smoking cigarettes was good for you. It's like I think we all know that at the very least they're detrimental to your health. Well, now we can argue about the severity of it. And there's people that are on Twitter nowadays saying nicotine's good for you. It's like, all right, I wouldn't go that far. I'm not even joking. There's literal accounts on Twitter that are like, yeah, nicotine's great for your brain. It's like, all right, is it, does it does it affect the rest of your body? It has to go through your kidneys, it has to go through your liver. Like, do you think adding a substance that's outside of yourself is good for you? Like, I think it's pretty basic, but
all these people of their diseases. And what do we then do about the population problem?
isn't me or is Twitter the dumbest app out of all of them? Like, people will talk about how bad TikTok is. I think Twitter is dumber. Twitter or X, whatever the fuck you want. I think Twitter is dumber than any other app. Like, genuinely, I don't know where it is, but like, I just think that like once you open that app, your IQ dips like 20 points because like you could say water is wet and then some self-proclaimed genius is going to tell you, well, actually it's this and that. It's like you can't even say basic things on Twitter without someone disagreeing with you. And it's like, I don't, if you're so diametrically opposed to me, like why do you even feel the need to say anything? Like if I see someone that has the exact opposite opinion of me, guess what I'm not going to do? Argue with them because I'm not going to. I'm not. There's no victory there. There's no agreement. They're not going to teach me anything, and I'm not going to teach them anything because it's just going to be talking past each other. I mean, it's just that app is just fucking like worthless. I don't know why Elon spent $44 billion on the biggest just I I don't know. I could rant all day. Reddit's the same way though. Maybe Reddit's even worse. I don't know. I think it was Nick Mullen. I think he said something along the lines of like they should make it so that if you just go on Reddit, you die. And I think that is as horrific as it is. I think it will advance humanity like 1,000 years into the future instantly because Reddit is the place where ideas go to die. And yeah, that's all I have to say about that app. But yeah.
I mean, we've stopped cholera, the black bubonic plague, and we're getting the better of tuberculosis. We may fix cancer and heart disease. Then what will people die of? Well, let us go on living. There'll be enormous quantities of us. Then we have to fix this birth thing. Pills for everybody. Then we find what are the effects, the side effects of those pills? What are the psychological effects upon men and women of not breeding children in the usual way? We don't know.
This is something we're seeing right now.
And what seems a good thing today, or yesterday, like DDT, turns out tomorrow to have been.
We talk about like birth control and stuff like this, and it's like it's a great thing that like you're not having kids that you can't afford to have, but it's also like, what do you think it's doing to you psychically? What do you think it's doing to you spiritually to not be progressing at the normal rate of human history? Like I'm 24. At my age, I bet you my ancestors had like 3 kids. It's like at a certain point I have to grow up, and at a certain point I have to develop into new stages of life. And I think we're prolonging these stages of life to a unnatural place. And it's like, no wonder why we feel like we're always behind. No wonder why we feel like we're not doing everything that we can. It's a very weird idea that I don't think is necessarily grasped nowadays. I mean, if you talk about like if you talk to like the fundamentalist Christians, they'll be like, "Well, you have to wait till marriage." It's like so you think that people should get married at four, like, you know what I mean? It's like I think there's natural stages, not natural time frames of when you should do certain things to accentuate your growth so that like you feel like you're living the way we were designed to. You know what I mean? It's very weird. I don't know. I think like people that push off having a family, push off having kids, men and women are in for a rude awakening. It's like I don't know about you, but I don't want to be 70 when I meet my grandkids for the first time. Like, I want to be able to do stuff with them. I want to be able to play with them. Like, I want to have the energy to, play with my kids, play with my grandkids when the time comes. Like, I want to, you know what I mean? It's like, I don't get like, oh, I can always do it tomorrow. I can always do it tomorrow. Like, that's what you say to things that you never want to accomplish. Like, if you keep pushing something off to tomorrow, it never gets done. I promise you, there's something in your life that you keep saying, I'm pushing off, I'm pushing off, I'm pushing off, and like day after day after day after day, you never do it. Like I have a billion things that I should have done this week that I kept saying, oh, I'll just do it tomorrow. And it's like, what do you think is happening with these overarching goals? What do you think is happening with the things that you've been saying you're going to do for years? It's just going to continue to get pushed off. It's very weird to me. You always have to try something just before you're ready. There's no such thing as perfect timing. There's no such thing as the present. And if you feel a little apprehensive about it, if you feel a little scared about it, like that's a good thing. That means you're about to experience some growth. That means you're about to challenge yourself in a way that you haven't done so already. I don't know. It's very weird to me.
In a disaster. What seemed in the moral and spiritual sphere, too, like great virtues in times past, are easily seen today as hideous evils. Let's take, for example, the Inquisition. In its own day, among Catholics, the Holy Inquisition was regarded as we today regard the practice of psychiatry. You see, you feel that in curing a person of cancer, almost anything is justified. The most complex operations, the most weird surgery. People suspended for days and days on the end of tubes with X-ray penetration, burning. Or people undergoing shock treatment. People locked in the colorless, monotonous corridors of mental institutions. In all good faith, they knew that witchcraft and heresy were terrible things. Awful plagues, imperiling people's souls forever and ever. So any means were justified to cure people of heresy. We don't change.
It's when you see events like the Inquisition, you just like what? Like the Inquisition say that it purify the church. You could somewhat justify. I don't think you can, but there's definitely the argument. But at the same time, like it took people like Isaac Newton away from expressing their true ideas. If you know anything about Isaac Newton, you know that a third of his writings was devoted to alchemy, and alchemy is the purification of the soul. If you tie the Bible and alchemy together, I think that's one of the most powerful transformative experiences you can have. But he was forced to put it in an allegorical sense to say that the purification of the soul is really the transmutation of lead into gold. And we know this isn't the case because, just look up Manly P. Hall alchemy. Like it'll prove to you that it's not. It's a very trivial thing to create lead into gold compared to transmuting your soul into something superior, purifying your soul, purifying who you are, taking everything that's happened to you and spinning it into good and then putting that good into the world. Like that's a much harder thing than purely turning a physical substance into another physical substance. Like I mean, chemistry will prove that turning one physical substance into another is very easy. And it's like it sucks because ideas like this weren't pushed forward. Ideas like this were steeped in allegory, and it's not even understood to this day exactly what Newton was writing about, exactly what Paracelsus was writing about. Like it made a lot of these ideas go underground, and it really halted human existence because imagine we were talking about alchemy as a kid. I mean, most people wouldn't understand it because it's allegorical, it's representational, it's symbolic. But again, it's like, what if we just put this out en masse? I feel like a lot more people would be a lot happier, the ones that actually grasp these concepts.
We're doing the same thing today, but under different names. We can look back at those people and see how evil that was, but we can't see it in ourselves. So therefore, beware of virtue. Lao Tzu, the Chinese philosopher, said, the highest virtue is not virtue, and therefore really is.
Highest virtue is not virtue, therefore really is virtue. The idea that he's saying here is that the highest ideal is holding things that are beneficial, but not being too attached to them. Knowing the exceptions, knowing when the the time calls to be courageous, knowing when the time calls to be honorable, when the time calls to do this, when the time calls to stand up. Like, you know what I mean?
Is virtue. But inferior virtue cannot let go of being virtuous, and therefore is not virtue. Translated in more of a periphrastic way, the highest virtue is not conscious of itself as virtue, and therefore really is virtue. Lower virtue is so self-conscious that it's not virtue.
So what he's saying is when you do something for the good of others because it's for the good of others. But this is like the Mr. Beast paradox. It's like, is Mr. Beast a good guy or does he do all the charity for views? You know what I mean? Like in a certain ideal, like what Mr. Beast is doing is good, but at the same time, what he's doing is purely motivated from the continuation of his social platform. Like, do you think if it became unprofitable for him to give away money, would he continue to do it? Like, if he had lost everything and he only had $1 left, do you think he would give it to someone in need? And that's the idea. I'm not saying that I take it this far with most of the people, but it's like I think there's a lot worse people in this world because that dude's giving away millions of dollars. But um, it's the idea of doing something not for selfish means, doing something because it is right, doing something because it is justified. Again, we can go back to Thoreau. Thoreau was willing to sit in jail, forego his freedom for the idea of what he believed in.
In other words, when you breathe, you don't congratulate yourself on being virtuous. But breathing is a great virtue. It's living. When you come out with beautiful eyes, blue or brown or green as the case may be, you don't congratulate yourself for having grown one of the most fabulous jewels on earth. So it's just eyes. And you don't account it a virtue. To see, to entertain the miracles of color and form, you say, oh, that's just... But that's real virtue. Virtue in the sense, the old sense of the word, as strength, is when we talk about the healing virtue of a plant. That's real virtue. But the other virtues are stuck on. They're ersatz, they're imitation virtues. And they usually create trouble.
This is the entire pole of society. It's put the good of others before the individual. It's so weird to me. I don't get why people are like actively like saying we want stronger government, we want this, we want that. It's like I just
Because
want to be
more
myself.
diabolical things are done in the name of righteousness. And be assured that everybody of whatever nationality or political frame of mind or religion always goes to war with a sense of complete right.
Ben Franklin said, "Those who give away freedom for security don't deserve either." And this can be extended to giving powers to the state that used to be self-reliant. This is the entire idea of Thoreau going out and living in the woods. Like the only way you find out who you are is when you have to do everything for yourself.
The other side is the devil. Our opponents, whether in China or Russia or Vietnam, have the same feeling of righteousness about what they're doing as we have on our side. And a plague on both houses. Because, as Confucius said, the goody-goodies are the thieves of virtue, which is the form of our own proverb. The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
That was a good video. I think this is a good place to end it. I'm not sure what time I'm going to stream tomorrow. Probably around a similar time, but guys, for everyone that came here, hung out with me, thank you guys for everyone that came here, had fun. Um, I love doing these streams. These are nice chill streams. So, yeah, peace out. Have a good rest of your night. See you next